No way. That's the third nanny in just 2 weeks. Ethan Reed slammed his phone onto the desk, frustration radiating from his stiff posture. His glass-walled office on the 25th floor of a Seattle skyscraper overlooked the wind-blown lake, but inside, the mood was as gray as winter rain. On the other end of the call, his personal assistant Clara sounded hesitant. She said she just couldn't take Ava's crying anymore, Mr. Reed. She's never seen anything like it. Ethan rubbed his temples. It had been 3 months since Julia, his wife, had passed away from a sudden stroke. Since then, their daughter, Ava, only 8 months old, seemed to be trapped in an endless storm of sorrow. She cried constantly, refused bottles, and didn't sleep through a single night. Find someone else, Ethan snapped. I don't care what it costs. Clara paused. I'll do my best, sir. Ethan ended the call and leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. For the first time in his life, the billionaire tech CEO felt completely powerless. No degree had prepared him for fatherhood, let alone single fatherhood. Meanwhile, Grace Thompson was scrubbing the stovetop in Ethan's sleek modern kitchen. The young Haitian woman had taken on this emergency cleaning job just that morning, filling in for a colleague who'd called in sick. She needed the money, desperately. Her grandmother back in Port-au-Prince needed weekly medication. Life in the U.S., while filled with opportunity, had never been easy. A piercing cry from upstairs made her freeze. She glanced up at the ceiling, eyebrows furrowing. That wasn't a normal baby's cry. Not hunger, not sleepiness. It sounded like a plea for help. Grace placed the rag on the counter. She knew she shouldn't interfere. This wasn't her job. But her feet were already moving toward the stairs before her mind could catch up. The crying grew louder with each step. At the top floor, she spotted a door ajar. She hesitated, then gently pushed it open. Ava lay in her crib, face flushed, tiny fists flailing, tears soaking her cheeks. The room was empty. The child was utterly alone. "Hello?" Grace called softly. "Is anyone here?" No response. Something inside her cracked. Against her better judgment, she stepped forward. "Shh, baby girl, what's wrong?" The diaper was full. Her clothes were damp with sweat. Grace found clean diapers and wipes in the nearby drawer. With quiet skill, she changed Ava, wiped her down, and carefully lifted the baby into her arms. Ava clutched at Grace's shirt, and her sobs began to settle. "It's okay now, I've got you." Grace hummed a soft Creole lullaby, one her grandmother used to sing, and in the arms of a stranger, Ava finally fell asleep. Grace sat beside the crib, gently patting Ava's back. In her arms, the baby slept soundly, as if she hadn't been screaming for the last 3 hours. A rare, almost sacred silence filled the room. It was the kind of stillness that the house had likely forgotten. She looked down at the tiny face, red and puffy from crying. Something stirred in her chest. This child wasn't family, wasn't her responsibility. But Grace felt a strange connection, something far beyond logic. That was when a cold, sharp voice broke the quiet. "What exactly are you doing in my daughter's room?" Grace startled. She turned. A tall man in a gray suit stood in the doorway, his eyes hard, his tone demanding, as though he'd just caught an intruder. I'm sorry, sir." Ava was crying nonstop. "No one was here, and You had no permission to touch her." He stepped forward, gaze locked on Grace. "Give her to me." Grace stood carefully, still holding Ava as if she were made of glass. She passed the baby into Ethan's arms. As soon as she did, Ava started wailing again, louder than before. Ethan tried to calm her, but the more he rocked, the harder she cried. He looked at Grace, confused. Why did she calm down with you?" Her diaper was dirty. She was drenched in sweat. "Maybe she's hungry too," Grace said softly. Ethan looked at Ava again, realizing, perhaps for the first time, what condition his daughter was in. He fell silent. "Have you cared for babies before?" "Yes, sir. I looked after my cousins in Haiti. I also worked for a family in Port-au-Prince before coming here." Still saying nothing, Ethan extended his arms back toward Grace. "Take her again." Grace hesitated, But when she took Ava back, the baby immediately stopped crying. She curled into Grace's chest like she'd been waiting for this moment. Ethan was visibly stunned. "What's your name?" "Grace Thompson. I work for the housekeeping agency." "Where are you from?" "Haiti. I moved to Seattle 6 months ago." Ethan studied them, the stranger and his daughter, as though trying to comprehend something that defied logic. 3 trained nannies had failed, but this cleaning woman had done the impossible. He took a breath. "Prepare her bottle. It's in the kitchen downstairs." Grace nodded and carried Ava down. In the kitchen, she prepared the formula, as she had many times before with her nieces and nephews. Ava drank without protest, her eyes fixed on Grace's face. From the doorway, Ethan watched silently. For the first time in weeks, there was no crying in the house. "What time do you finish today?" he asked quietly. "In about an hour. When you're done, come up to my office. I have a proposal for you." Grace gave a slight nod, unsure of what awaited her. But in that moment, with Ava sleeping in her arms, she knew one thing for certain. Something important had just begun. Grace knocked softly on the closed wooden door. She took a deep breath. "Come in." Ethan's voice came from inside, low and clipped. She opened the door and stepped in. The office was spacious, elegant, with towering bookshelves and a massive window overlooking the city. Ethan stood near it, his back to her, hands in his pockets. "Have a seat," he said, still not turning around. Grace sat in the chair across from the desk, her palms slightly damp with nervous sweat. She didn't know what to expect. A scolding for overstepping? Worse, termination from the cleaning agency? Ethan finally turned. His expression was softer than before. "Let me ask you directly, do you have experience with babies?" "I've cared for my nieces and nephews back home, and before coming to the US, I worked for a family in Port-au-Prince with newborn twins. But I'm not professionally trained, sir. I don't care about credentials, I care about results." He sat across from her and continued. "Since Julia died, I've hired 3 nannies. One quit despite the high pay. Another left in the middle of the night, but you," his voice lowered, "you walked in and calmed Ava. You made her sleep. I don't know how, but I know it happened." Grace said nothing, she simply looked down. "I want to offer you the position of Ava's full-time nanny live-in. You'll have your own room, weekends off. I'll pay you $20,000, 0 cents a month." She stared at him. "Me? But I'm just a cleaner. I don't need a perfect resume. I need someone who makes my daughter feel safe." Grace didn't speak. $20,000, 0 cents a month. That kind of money could save her grandmother's life. The medication, maybe even surgery. But fear crept in. What if Ava stopped liking her? What if Ethan changed his mind? What if she messed up? "I'll need some time to think. I need you to start tomorrow." Grace met his eyes. The same cold eyes now carried something else. Exhaustion, yes. Desperation. But also the faintest flicker of hope. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll do it." Ethan nodded. He didn't smile, but his features relaxed ever so slightly. "Thank you." Grace left the office. Her steps were cautious, as if afraid the moment would vanish. But inside, something warm had begun to stir. The next morning, Grace returned to the large Queen Anne home with a single small suitcase. Ethan met her at the door. He didn't say much, just a nod, and led her to a room on the top floor. It was simple, warm, and spotlessly clean. "This will be your room. Ava's is just next door," he said calmly. Grace nodded, placing her suitcase gently on the floor. It still felt like a dream. Ethan led her to Ava's room. The baby lay in her crib, eyes wide, staring up at the ceiling. When Grace entered, Ava reached her tiny arms toward her like a welcome. "Hello, little one," Grace smiled. She picked Ava up and the baby instantly clung to her shoulder, as if afraid of being separated again. Grace felt that quiet fear, subtle but very real, nestled inside this tiny life. "We're going to start fresh, okay?" she whispered. Grace began to build a new routine. Fixed feeding times, nap times, play sessions, and lullabies at night. She read to Ava each morning, played with her using simple toys, and stayed patient during every fussy spell. Day by day, Ava settled. The sleepless nights faded, the endless crying stopped. Within a week, the house felt different, softer, cozier, alive. Ethan started coming home earlier. At first, he would just stand in the doorway and watch them play. Then slowly, he joined them, awkwardly trying to mimic Grace when she fed Ava, or sitting beside them as she read fairy tales. He didn't speak much, he didn't interfere, but Grace noticed the shift. One afternoon, while Grace was mixing formula, Ava crawled over to Ethan and raised her arms. Ethan, slightly stunned, leaned down and picked her up. She didn't cry. Instead, she looked at him with big, curious eyes. "She's starting to trust me," he whispered. Grace smiled and nodded. "Babies sense more than we realize. When adults are calm, they feel safe." Ethan looked at her. For the first time, his gaze wasn't guarded. It was grateful. No words of thanks were needed, no grand gestures. Between them, something was forming, quietly, steadily, sincerely. An invisible thread connecting three lives that once felt completely apart. It was a quiet Friday night when the power suddenly went out across the neighborhood. Grace was giving Ava a warm bath, lathering soap gently into her tiny hair when the lights vanished. "Oh, no." She clutched the baby close, steadying her voice even though her heart picked up speed. The room was swallowed by pitch black. Then came the sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway. "Grace, are you okay?" It was Ethan, his voice more urgent than she'd ever heard it. "We're fine. I was mid-bath with her." He stepped in, phone flashlight casting a soft halo in the darkness. Together, they dried Ava and wrapped her in a towel. Oddly enough, she didn't cry. The baby just stared at the flickering shadows on the walls, calm and curious. "Looks like the whole block's out," Ethan muttered, glancing at his phone. "Might be hours before it comes back." Downstairs, they lit a few candles. The warm glow transformed the modern space into something softer, more intimate. Ava lay on a blanket on the floor, babbling to herself and grabbing at her feet. Ethan lowered himself beside her, not far from Grace. He doesn't seem to care that we're in the dark. Babies don't fear darkness. They fear being left alone. He looked up at her. "That almost sounds like something for adults, too." Grace smiled faintly. "Maybe it is." Silence settled. No phones. No background noise. Just the candlelight and Ava's soft sounds. Then Ethan spoke. "Have you ever been afraid of getting hurt?" Grace turned to him. The candlelight shimmered in his storm gray eyes, softening them. "My parents died in a car crash when I was a child," she said quietly. "Then my first love left for the US and never called. I guess, ever since, I've been scared to love too much, because people leave." Ethan was silent for a while. "After Julia died, I couldn't touch anything in her room. I couldn't open drawers, I couldn't even look at our pictures, and every time Ava cried, I felt like I was failing her. Like I didn't just lose my wife, I lost the ability to be a father." Grace didn't interrupt. She simply listened. "I'm afraid of loving again," he whispered, "because the last time I did, it ended in loss." "I think we're not afraid of love," Grace said slowly. "We're afraid that love won't stay." Their eyes met. Deep, quiet, real. "Grace." There was no awkwardness, no nervous laughter, just stillness. He reached up and touched her cheek. She closed her eyes, not pulling away. "I've been holding this in since the first time I saw you hold Ava," he whispered. "I didn't know what it was, but it felt true." Grace opened her eyes. "And what if this is just temporary? What if tomorrow you go back to being cold and distant? Then tonight is still real." And then he leaned in. The kiss was soft, tentative at first, like a question long unspoken. But it deepened, as though all the fear, all the longing, all the buried things finally rose to the surface. They pulled away slowly, their foreheads resting against each other, breath shared between them. I'm still afraid, Grace whispered. So am I. But somehow that fear felt like a beginning. 3 weeks had passed since the night without power. No one mentioned the kiss. But it hung there, floating between them like a quiet promise and a silent warning. Ethan had grown warmer. He smiled more, played with Ava, even watched Grace and the baby from the hallway with a look that felt less like a boss and more like someone afraid of losing what he was starting to love. Grace didn't dare hope, but deep down, she felt it. Something real, something slowly forming. Until that Tuesday morning. Ethan had left early for a meeting. With Ava napping, Grace decided to finally clean the master bedroom, a space she'd always avoided out of respect. While organizing the bottom drawer, she found an old box covered in dust. She hesitated. It was personal, but it was her job to clean. She placed it on the bed and opened it. Old photos, letters, a few pieces of jewelry, and a black phone, long dead. Just then, Ava began crying. Grace brought her in and laid her next to her. Ava reached out and touched the phone. The screen blinked to life. Battery low. A video began to play. Juliet, Ethan's late wife, appeared, blue eyes, soft voice. If you're watching this, I'm probably gone. Grace moved to pause it, but the next words stopped her cold. Ava isn't our biological daughter. I adopted her without telling you. The rest unfolded like a quiet storm. Julia explained her visit to an orphanage, how she fell in love with a child no one wanted. While Ethan was away, she completed the adoption and forged the paperwork. I was afraid you wouldn't love her if you knew, but she's our daughter in every way. When it ended, Grace sat frozen. Ava curled against her, playing with a scarf, oblivious. That afternoon, after Ethan returned, Grace waited until Ava fell asleep before going to him. I found something in your room. Ethan's eyes narrowed when he saw the phone. Julia's phone? There's a video. You need to see it. He said nothing, played it. Grace stayed silent. When it ended, Ethan didn't move. Then suddenly, he stood. His chair crashed to the floor. No, that's not true. She wouldn't do this. Ethan, how long have you known? You watched it first, didn't you? Ava tapped it. I didn't mean to. So now you're using my daughter, waiting to spring this on me? No, I just thought you deserved to know. What I know is you've been digging through my wife's things and saving this to manipulate me. His voice turned ice. Grace stepped back, tears stinging. I never wanted anything from you. I love Ava. You wanted to stay, didn't you? Thought if you showed me this, I'd be too broken to let you go. His tone was cruel now, controlled, calculated. Grace's voice broke. I held your daughter when no one else could. I soothed her, loved her. I stayed up through nights when you wouldn't even open her door. You got paid. Well, I owe you nothing. Those words shattered everything. Grace swallowed. I'll go. Now. No goodbye, no eye contact. He turned his back, like she was nothing. Grace packed quietly. Before leaving, she stepped into Ava's room. The baby slept peacefully. She bent down, kissed her gently. I love you. Always will. Then she walked out, carrying a broken heart and a truth too heavy for anyone to bear alone. Grace left on a rainy afternoon, leaving behind a silence so cruel it echoed in every corner of the house. Ethan didn't walk her to the door. He stood behind it, listening as her suitcase rolled across the wooden floor, as the front door clicked shut, and then nothing. The first feeling wasn't anger, it was emptiness. He turned around and tried to convince himself it was for the best, but then, in the living room, he spotted Ava's burp cloth, left draped over the armrest of the couch. It still held that faint, comforting scent of baby powder, milk, and jasmine. Grace's jasmine shampoo. He dropped it like it burned him. That night, Ava cried herself hoarse. Not the usual tired whimpering or hunger fussing, but a low, aching, relentless wail, like her little soul was mourning something it couldn't name. Ethan tried everything. He rocked her, sang lullabies, nothing worked. When he approached, she twisted away, reaching out, searching desperately for someone else, for Grace. His heart squeezed. He called in a professional nanny, highly qualified, years of experience. She lasted less than 10 hours. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes," she whispered. "I've never seen a child so heartbroken. She won't let anyone near her. It's not normal." Ethan didn't argue. The house felt too big, too still. No laughter, no lullabies, no soft footfalls from the kitchen, just ticking clocks and hollow spaces. On the third day after Grace left, Ethan didn't go to the office. He sat in Ava's room all day, watching his daughter clutch the teddy bear Grace had given her. Her eyes were vacant, her tiny body curled in a corner of the crib. "Ava, baby, you need to eat," he pleaded softly. But Ava didn't respond. She hugged the bear tighter and whimpered. Ethan sank onto the floor, covering his face with his hands. He remembered the way Grace had once held Ava close, the way she sang lullabies in her gentle Jamaican accent, the way Ava giggled when Grace pretended to be a cat. He remembered the first time Ava had looked up with wide, innocent eyes and called out, "Mama," her voice unsure but clear, not to Julia, not to a picture, but to Grace. That single word had cut through the fog of grief like sunlight through storm clouds. It wasn't just a name. It was a choice, a bond, a truth. He remembered everything, and for the first time in years, Ethan broke. That night, in the quiet of the nursery, Ethan picked up Julia's old phone and played the video again. He watched each frame, listened to every breath. This time, no anger, no denial, just clarity. "Ava isn't our biological daughter." Julia's voice trembled, but it was firm. He saw the fear in her eyes, and the love. A deep, unwavering love. "I was afraid if I told you, you wouldn't love her. I couldn't bear to lose you both." When the video ended, Ethan sat in the dark. Julia hadn't deceived him out of selfishness. She had followed her heart. And Grace, she hadn't manipulated him. She hadn't asked for anything. She'd simply thought he had a right to know. Then she'd left, with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. Ava whimpered in her sleep. Ethan moved to the crib and saw her tossing, searching. "Grace," the little girl mumbled, barely audible. It shattered him. The next morning, Ethan called a video forensics expert. He needed undeniable truth, no more denial. 2 days later, the result came in. The video is real, no edits, original sound and footage. Ethan didn't go to work. He sat in the living room, staring at the photo of Julia holding Ava above the fireplace. But in his mind, it was Grace he saw, rocking Ava in her arms, whispering lullabies. He knew what he had to do. It might be too late, but he had to try. This time, he wouldn't let her walk away again. The sky over Birmingham that day was overcast, as if it too understood what Grace was trying so hard to forget. She was wiping down the kitchen table when her employer called from the front room. "Grace, someone's here for you." "Who is it?" "A gentleman, very well dressed, said his name is Ethan Reed." Grace froze in place. The cloth slipped from her hand and fell to the floor. She didn't need to hear anything more. Just that name alone made her chest tighten. She walked to the living room. Ethan stood on the porch, holding a gray beanie, his suit crisp, but his face worn, exhausted and anxious. His eyes no longer held the cold detachment she remembered. "Hello, Grace. Why are you here?" Her voice was cold as ice. Ethan faltered, clearly unsure of where to begin. He glanced at Grace's employer, silently pleading for help. The older woman understood and gave a gentle nod. "If you two need privacy, you're welcome to talk in the living room." Grace said nothing, her arms folded across her chest, waiting. After a heavy silence, Ethan spoke. I know I don't have the right to be here, but I needed to see you. And you think just showing up will make me listen to you?" "I don't know what I thought. I just know I need you." Grace let out a bitter laugh. When I needed a word of trust, a single ounce of belief, you threw me out. You called me a liar, a manipulator. You humiliated me right in front of Ava. I was wrong. I lost control. I couldn't accept the truth. But now I know. I know everything you said was real. Grace clenched her hands tightly. I didn't tell you to break your family apart, Ethan. I told you because I believed you had the right to know, because I thought you were a decent man. But I was wrong. You're just a proud man who doesn't know how to value anyone. Ethan lowered his head. You're right. I'm proud, and I was a fool. And I lost the one person Ava truly needed. Grace said nothing. I watched the video not once, 10 times. I had it verified. It's real, no edits, no tampering. Too little, too late. I know, but I can't just pretend none of it happened. Ava, she's not smiling, not eating, not sleeping. She calls your name in her sleep. I've tried everything, Grace, but I can't replace you in her heart. She turned her face away, tears slipping from her eyes. You don't need me. You just want someone who can keep your daughter quiet. Ethan took a small step toward her, but dared not get too close. No, Grace, I need you, not as a nanny, as someone irreplaceable in my life, and in Ava's. I know I hurt you, I was wrong, and I'm sorry. With everything I am. Sorry? She scoffed. You think an apology is enough? No, it'll never be enough, but I'll do anything if you'll give me a chance. Grace stood silently, her jaw tight. I can't go back to being your housemaid. I can't live in a home where I can be thrown out like garbage. I don't want you to be my employee. I want you back as part of our family, as the woman Ava should call Mom. And if you'd allow it, as the person I want to build the rest of my life with. The air grew still. Grace looked into Ethan's eyes. She saw real regret in them, but she also saw that her heart hadn't fully healed. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I don't expect you to, not yet, but I'm willing to wait, however long it takes, for forgiveness, for trust, for the chance to be someone worthy of you. A tear fell from Grace's cheek. I'll come back, but not for you, for Ava. I can't let her suffer anymore. Ethan nodded, his eyes glistening. Thank you for coming back, for not turning your back forever. I'm not coming back for you, she said with a sigh, but I won't deny that part of me still believes in the man I thought you were. Ethan didn't respond. He took a step back, bowing his head in silent understanding. This return would not be easy. But this time, Grace was the one setting the terms, and Ethan, the man who once held all the power, now held only one thing. Grace returned to Seattle on a late autumn afternoon. The city was still bustling as always, but inside her, everything felt like it was being reset. Ethan picked her up at the bus station. No chauffeur, no luxury car, just a simple coat and a hesitant smile. I'll take you home, he said softly. Grace didn't reply. She simply nodded. The car moved slowly through familiar streets. No one spoke during the ride, but the silence no longer felt heavy. Something was beginning to heal, not through words, but through safe silence. When they arrived at the house, Ava was asleep. Ethan led Grace to her old room. Everything was just as she had left it. I didn't let anyone touch your room, he said awkwardly. I thought if you ever came back, everything should stay the same. Grace looked around. The handkerchief she left on the nightstand, the book she was halfway through, even the small perfume bottle still sat on the vanity. Her heart clenched slightly. Thank you, she said quietly, for keeping it all. Ethan pressed his lips together, as if wanting to say more but choosing silence. He stepped out, giving her space. That evening, Grace stepped into Ava's room. The little girl was fast asleep, rosy cheeks and steady breathing. Grace sat beside her, whispering, I'm back, sweetheart, and I'm not going anywhere this time. As if sensing the familiar presence, Ava shifted, her tiny hand reaching toward her. Grace gently took it. In that moment, she knew. This was home. In the days that followed, the three of them began to rebuild their lives. It wasn't easy. Ava clung to Grace constantly, terrified when she was out of sight. Grace stayed patient, never leaving without explaining, never letting her sleep without singing as before. Ethan changed too. He no longer barked orders or made decisions alone. Whenever Ava needed something, he asked Grace first. He learned to listen, to admit mistakes, and, most importantly, to stop forcing affection. One evening, after Ava had gone to sleep, Ethan sat with Grace in the living room. The soft amber light filled the quiet space between them. "Do you think we could start over?" Ethan asked, not daring to meet her eyes. Grace was silent for a while. Then she said, "Starting over doesn't mean forgetting. I haven't forgotten the hurt, but I haven't forgotten the good either. I don't expect you to forget. I just hope you'll let me create new memories with you, better ones." Grace turned to look at him. For the first time, she didn't avoid his gaze. "We'll go step by step, no rushing, no pressure. Is that okay with you?" Ethan smiled, not with triumph, but with quiet surrender, like a man who'd finally stopped running from himself. "That's okay, slow, but honest." And in that fragile stillness, a new chapter began. Not a fairy tale, but something better, real, raw, and rooted in a promise neither of them said aloud, "We'll try."